Hey up, it's Noano Vortex, and this is going to sort of be probably a carry on from the videos doing algorithmic anarchism. So just a sort of riffing video where I just talk about some things that have been on my mind recently of a philosophical type, and just explore some of those aloud. So not necessarily fully formed sort of ideas, just sort of a stream of consciousness of ideas. So if that seems interesting, I'll drink my Diet Pepsi and crack on with this. That wasn't an advertisement, by the way. Who the hell would think Pepsi would be sponsoring rambling philosophical videos on YouTube? I highly doubt it. But anyway, yeah, something I wanted to explore was because I suppose I've been talking about these two monolithic ideologies or economic systems in previous videos when I've been exploring these questions, which are of course capitalism and socialism. These are the two sort of economic systems that in the 20th century certainly were in direct opposition and vied for the sort of cultural dominance. Now, where am I going with this? So I wanted to sort of try and explore some assumptions in these ideologies, explore and just have like a sort of riff on it. So it's interesting in capitalism, people seem to think of that as a sort of natural, almost like a natural law. When it gets argued as to why capitalism should be the prevalent system or the most efficient or effective system, it's sort of often argued as if it was a natural law of the universe, that this is just sort of the way that the economic forces should be governed, which is just an interesting way to start off. Whereas socialism is often seen as fundamentally unworkable. People will point to examples from the past, such as obviously the Soviet Union or other socialist societies which fell by the wayside in their ideals or basically became authoritarian leftist, I guess. So I was just having a walk now actually, and I was just sort of thinking maybe eventually, like because I've always thought of myself as like vaguely, I mean I'm sort of like libertarian lefty. I've always thought of myself as having some socialist principles, not necessarily being hard full-on communist or anything, certainly not. I don't even know if I'd consider myself a Marxist these days. But I've always sort of fallen naturally down on that side of like being obviously like pro human rights, who wouldn't be really, that's not really a left-right issue, but sort of having this vaguely left of centre worldview, I suppose. Now, what was I saying? Let's get back to what I was actually talking about. But I think as I've got a little older, I'm 34 now, I'm approaching middle age. I'm not necessarily mature, I wouldn't even say that, but I've sort of become, certainly in terms of philosophy, a bit more of a pessimist in this regard. I'm not so convinced that politics will bring about great change. Even even in the democratic system we live in now, which, don't get me wrong, I think is a good thing, it's been a natural evolution over years and years and years, but I don't even think that really has a potential for radical change in the world. Now obviously I guess this is where you'd get probably, I mean, sort of Marxist-Leninists would probably agree with that, I guess. If you want to know their sort of ideas, because one of the things in Marxist-Leninism is that you have a vanguard party who basically dictates you with the proletariat and all that, and then the usher in the new world slowly and surely, I guess, which is, I always thought it's a bit of a silly idea, but I digress. I'm sort of rambling now. But I found as I've got now to the age of 34, I'm much more pessimistic and, to be honest, much more politically just demotivated. No, I don't want this to end up too nihilistic in its outlook or its tone, but it sort of probably will end up that way because, I mean, politics is just a process, isn't it? I guess of you'd hope sort of progressive change over time, or in some, obviously if you're conservative, you want to conserve the established order and the what you value as traditional values, whatever they may be. Because obviously that will be different depending on the culture. I mean, but it's interesting actually because the way that the terms are used, obviously progressive is generally used to mean somebody who wants to progress certain value systems and certain programs, and conservative is, this is more in America, but conservative is used much more as a sort of socially conservative, family values, maybe church and state being allied sort of thing. But it's interesting because in terms of conservative, because no cultural value system is ever fixed. How could it be? Because I mean that those values which were established had to be established at one point. It's a constant power dynamic existing between, I guess, like thesis and antithesis, that sort of thing, like the Hegelian, it was a dialectical materialism and whatnot, I guess. Sort of, I think it's that, I can't remember. I'm really a bit rusty on all my Marxist or and Hegelian language. Yeah, anyway, where can I go from here? So, what I'm basically saying is, I sort of see, sorry I rambled a lot to get to this part, I sort of see capitalism as an intrinsically pessimistic philosophy in terms of how you view the world, and obviously socialism is eternally optimistic. So I'm going to call these two things the big optimist and the big pessimist. So the big pessimist thinks things can never really change. Human nature is inherently selfish. When push comes to shove, we may wear masks to pretend to really care about our fellow human being, but if push comes to shove, we ultimately are selfish creatures who are concerned primarily with self-preservation. And equality is, whilst it's a nice sort of abstract value, it's not something we should strive for, and we can't even ever achieve, really, which I sort of agree with in a lot of respects. I mean, equality of outcome is what I'm talking about now, I guess. Like, how could that even work in a society? I mean, I guess if we value everything in money, which is itself an abstract representation of something of value, then you could argue that it would become irrelevant. But that's in a highly hypothetical world, and we live in a world that is governed by these economic forces. So I don't know. Maybe we can, but who knows really. But yeah. So then there's that. And capitalism is obviously, like I was saying before, is often argued to be like a very natural state of affairs because it is hierarchical always been hierarchical in the way that it functions in society, because as a result of to actually make a profit in a free market, you have to make a profit. so you need to there needs to be some sort of structure in place there for a company to make a profit. I don't know, I'm sort of losing my train of thought there. Anyway, let's go back on to socialism. So socialism, I think, is sort of eternally optimistic. It thinks of human beings as, in an idealistic sense, of human nature and the sort of ideals of brotherhood. So it sort of emphasises not necessarily the collective over the individual. I think that's a simplification, but it emphasises collective working together to make things better for the collective whole, I guess, he says, while sipping his Diet Pepsi. But yeah, we're all hypocrites, really, to be honest. I had a Burger King earlier on as well, just sucking the corporate cock. Gotta love that Pepsi. But anyway, I don't know if there's much point to this video. I'm just sort of jumping around a bit. So I think, yeah, basically going back to myself as I've got older, and especially with the failure of the Labour project recently of Corbyn, where I was starting to be reinvigorated in a left sort of platform, popularist leftist platform, a socialist platform, and it's all crumbled now. We've got Keir Starmer in charge and blah blah blah. I don't want to go into too much leftist politics, and I actually voted for Keir Starmer actually, purely because I thought he was the best of a sort of not really that impressive lineup. But anyway, that's by the way. But we've had the failure of that. There are some successes going on, but then let's not get into fucking geopolitical blah 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 blah. Who cares? Like I said, I'm not that politically engaged currently. I sort of dip in and out of politics, but I just don't find any answers in that world anymore. I don't have any desire to want to be a politician or be involved in politics, particularly. Certainly not conventional politics. Beyond that, I'm in Russia as an English person, so most of the politics here is lost on me. Most of the politics is lost on me here. I don't understand any of the complications here, so I'm not really involved in it in any sense. So, but I don't know. I mean, it's a tough one in terms of like, there are times when, as a human species or as a human being or as an individual, you should definitely be involved in politics. Times of struggle, times of need, and I guess there will, not always, but there's always going to be this sort of struggle between this pessimistic worldview, which I was talking about, which is sort of represented by the best we can do is basically democratic institutions and a sort of regulated capitalism, which is sort of where I lie now, I think, after much wrangling and sort of agonising over this thing. I do think I'm, I don't know, essentially some sort of like liberal, I guess, or some sort of label like that, with some sort of democratic, with some sort of social democratic thing there as well, but basically like that. And then you've got your sort of eternal optimist, your communists, your anarchists even, certainly, and some socialists, I guess, who are optimistic about human nature, but I know this is coming off like just tepid centerism. I'm consciously aware of that, but I'm a liberal, I guess. So what can I do? I can't help but be tepidly centre and sort of centrist and not really having any strong opinions on it. Well, fuck it. This is absolutely a completely rambling blog, but I think why not? I mean, I've lost my train of thought completely. But yeah, something I've been looking into recently. This is going to be a long vlog, so tune in and out as you wish. Something I've been looking into a bit recently is Nick Land and Accelerationism. So I don't know if that's sort of like fueling my ruminating pessimism about this whole question, as it were. Because I mean, from what I gather from that, I'm not reading any of it. I'm just sort of like listening to talks by him and sort of summing up videos on YouTube. So I'm far from an expert on this guy. Actually, very far from being an expert on Nick Land. Just in fact, I'm only just really starting to dive into the sort of basics of his thought. And I think he's even been accused of being a sort of crypto-fascist in his writings before, which I don't know a great deal about, so I can't expand on it any more than that. But he sort of had this idea that we'd basically create super intelligent life forms, and it's basically sort of a pessimistic view of capitalism hyper accelerating into these sort of AIs that we create, or artificial intelligence, or technological hyper intelligences, and there's nothing we can really do to prevent that from happening. Even it's sort of anti, from what I understand of it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm still reading and finding out about this guy and this philosopher. It essentially rejects leftist sort of ideals as just sort of just a byline in history which aren't going to really go anywhere, and that this thing is just going to, this capitalistic machine, there's a lot of it's informed by Deleuze, Anti-Oedipus and 1,000 Plateaus, I guess. But I'm yet to read much of it, so again I need to read it. But yeah, this whole idea of like machines and the history just snowballing towards this moment of hyper accelerationism, I guess. That was a very muddled talk about what I think it's all about, but that's sort of interesting to me at the minute. Again, maybe it's somewhat pessimistic and somewhat a negative thing to focus on in terms of philosophy, but it's interesting stuff. I mean, Deleuze is fucking mental, but it's interesting stuff. It's schizoanalysis and all that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, the good philosophers and very rarely not entirely unbalanced. I mean, Nietzsche, of course, is a great philosopher, an interesting philosopher, but also certainly towards the end of his life unbalanced. I mean, all the really rational philosophers are quite dry to read. I mean, even though I even remember, I suppose someone I've read in that regard who's obviously very classical philosopher is Plato. I mean, it's sort of interesting to read and get some historical context on that, but I never really got anything. Well, there are some interesting ideas in Plato actually, but I never really was excited by Plato as I am by someone like Nietzsche or Chiron. So yeah, I don't know. That's just a ramble. Anyway, I think that's enough. That's 20 minutes of me rambling about philosophy and sort of. I guess my main point is I don't know. There's not really any points. I'm just asking lots of questions openly and sort of. That's good, because in philosophy, a lot of the time you just want to be asking whys. The answers don't always come up, especially not if you're just talking to yourself in front of a camera. The answers don't always come that fast, which is the process of the world, really. But yeah, If you have any thoughts, leave them below. This has obviously been quite just a free-form blog, like I like to do sometimes. That's essentially what this channel is about now. I just sometimes post sort of vlogs like this where I explore an idea or philosophy, and yeah, so if you like it, like it. If you subscribe, if you like it, have a into our vortex. Yeah, peace out and that. Rock on.